So my first 4 days were interesting because I only had 4 days because I picked up the schedule. By the time they hired me, I was basically hired for a particular schedule, and they gave me my entire schedule for like the rest of the year. It tells me that I'm basically alternating back and forth between 2 truck numbers the rest of the year. One in one truck 1 week, and then the next time in the other truck, and it alternates back and forth. 5 days, 2 days off, 5 days, 3 days off. And this was 1 day in on the 5 day, 3 days off schedule. So I only worked 4 days this week. And it's very different than Schneider. I guess I'll put it that way. Because first of all, with when you were doing pods, you don't do a whole lot of backing. And, I usually finish early enough in the day that I can pull straight through or, back in at whatever, with plenty of room if I wanted to back in at I needed to straighten up a little bit, go back and forth a few times as I was learning to back. But that doesn't really happen so much when you are backing up to docks. And that's okay. By now, I won't say I've gotten backing down to a science. I have a pretty good understanding of it. I know what I'm supposed to do. The biggest issue I'm normally running into is with a right angle back or any kind of a back is trying to figure at what point I need to, I know to start the jackknife, and then at what point do I need to reverse it and how to time that exactly right. I know basically that if you start like this and you start to articulate at the point where this angle equals the angle on the other side that you're going into, when those two angles are about the same, that's whatever this angle is, it's going to basically, the truck is going to basically go that much more by the time you go straight, roughly, as a rule of thumb. It was something I learned back when I was at CDL school. I saw a video online and it said that, and I double checked it and they said, yeah, that's pretty much right. So I reported that night at 10 p.m. And very first thing they did was they checked out my truck. But as with most things, it's like, okay, go ahead and sign your name, your driver's number, your stuff like this, and then check off these things like fuel, that we've given you a set of keys and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I haven't actually, and that it also said that the truck was clean. I'm like, I haven't checked anything. It's like, it's one of those forms where they just want you to sign it, and if you stop to read the fine print, then they're going to be like, okay, sure, go for it. And they don't care if you do. It's just no one ever does. So I went ahead and said, well, let me at least, go check out the truck. So I grabbed the key and I went over there. And as a matter of fact, I did everything except look at the fuel. I did a pre-trip, went all the way around the whole thing, verified everything was working except looking at the fuel gauge. And I went back in and then I checked everything except for the fuel. I said, did you, and the fuel? And I'm like, that's the one thing I didn't check. I pre-tripped the entire truck, looked over everything, wanted to make sure I knew the difference between a Kenworth T680 and any of the other trucks I've been in. The Peterbilt from CDL school, the International LT, and the Freightliner Cascadias. I didn't have to pre-trip the or post-trip or anything like that. The truck I did my road test in. So this was the real deal. This was me pre-tripping, and it's a truck is a truck. You can pretty much identify the parts by look, and I don't know what everything is called, but I can look at it and go through the checklist that was embedded in you. If it's metal, from 160 trucking school, I will say this: they embed a lot of things in your mind. So like metals, are they bent, cracked, or broken? If it's rubber, is it chipped, cracked, or broken? If it's a hose, are there leaks? Abrasions, bubbles, cuts, things like that. They reiterated that so many times that when I look at something, I can identify if it is that material, is it flawed in that way? So that's cool. Now, I went ahead and went back in there and I said, okay, I'm sure everything is fine then. So anyway, I jumped in the truck that's when I realized that it had barely over a quarter of a tank left. And I was like, crap, I already signed the form. That's all right. I'll fuel up. They don't give you fuel assignments, but I know the area. So I was like, I know where there's some fuel stops, some pilots and Flying J's. Now, I got my assignment not by the time, it was before that, before I actually started. So I looked at it. I already knew I was going to Cordelia, Georgia first, and then Greenwood, South Carolina, then back to Monroe. I knew that. So I drove to Cornelia, and because I had gone the previous day with Clifford, everything, I'm a pretty quick study. I was able to quickly figure out what I needed to do and how I needed to do it, and I remember the details, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And did the drop at Cornelia, and I would question whether or not they knew that was my first ever drop off for the Marten company. As a matter of fact, the person who was working there, I almost told him, because he said, "Yeah, I'm actually a cleaner. I'm only helping them out. I've never, unloaded a truck before, so I don't know how to use this." And so it's funny because I almost told him, well, it's all right. I've never. This is my first delivery with this company. Anyway, so finished there. Then I was starting to drive across, and knowing that that it was routing me not up 85, Interstate 85. It was taking me basically on Georgia and state highways. I knew it was not going to take me anywhere near a Pilot or Flying J. So right as I crossed over 85, I said, I'm going to go on. It's about not even more than 10 miles south to the nearest Pilot or Flying J. So I went ahead and went down there and fueled up, and then had it reroute me. One thing I will say, the OmniTrack system, it's like a tablet that's a whole machine, and it's in the truck. It is a slow piece of crap. It is so slow. You press a button. If it doesn't click, if it doesn't, make a little boop noise, then it didn't take. So you might need to do it again. Wait a moment. Then it goes to the screen, or it doesn't. When you go to type in and you go to type in something in a field, you press the thing and the cursor's not flashing just yet. You give it a couple of seconds. Then you start typing in numbers, and it takes it's delayed. And then all of a sudden, like 3 of the 6 pop up there. And you're like, geez, this machine is so slow. And to get directions, I thought it was slow as Schneider. The program that Schneider originally had, Local Nav, that was the same exact interface as what we use. Now, it's the exact same with a few tweaks. Like with Schneider, if you were going under 5 miles an hour, you could fully operate anything on the tablet. With Marten, if you go at all, if your wheels are slightly turning, the whole tablet locks up, and the only thing you can access is navigation. And then when you stop, it will sometimes take a moment. And I'll be stopped, and I'll be looking at it saying, come on, come on, come on. And I'm watching it. And sometimes I'll be in the navigation screen. I'll hit the home button, and the only option that you have is follow me or resume. Resume is resuming the directions that you had, and follow me is just plot me someplace on the GPS screen. But, I'll go back to the main screen, and I'll be waiting for it to unghost the other numbers like dispatch or where to. And it just doesn't. I'm sitting there looking at the thing for like 30 seconds, and finally it releases. Another thing is it crashes, and it's so annoying because it doesn't crash like the Schneider Global Nav app does. The whole OmniTrack system crashes, and it will, everything has to you practically have to restart the OmniTracks. Because the very first time I experienced a crash in it, I was like, okay, well, I'll pull over to the side of the road and hopefully it'll straighten itself out. Well, it didn't. So I ended up pressing the button to shut it down, pressing and holding the button, and it says shutting down OmniTracks. And it sat there. And I looked at my watch and my clock on my phone, and it was over 10 minutes. And then finally it shut off. And then I pressed the button for it to start back up, and it took almost 5 minutes for it to come back up. and for it to log me back in and for it to load all the applications. 15 minutes. Such a waste of time on the buggy as crap, slow ass Omnitracks. So anyway, got to Greenwood, South Carolina. That was just fine. There was 2 locations there. Completely, dumped out the entire truck, and then we were good. We were done then, and it's cool. It was fine. All was well. Now the thing about it was, after that, I went back to the Marten facility. They didn't have a backhaul for me, so no backhaul. I was like, that's fine by me, because the way I look at it is, it was my first night out. It was probably them testing the waters with me and stuff, and it was fine. One of the things that I've gotten myself into such a habit of doing with Schneider and doing OTR is having to put miles down. This company, Marten, you have just your assignment, and it may be 250 miles for you to accomplish in, however many hours it takes you to do it. I don't really, for the first couple of nights, I felt the urge to kind of still push 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. But after that, I started setting the cruise control right at the speed limit. And the sense of urgency, like, I still feel like I want to get there in a timely manner, but I don't waste time. So I still get there, and I run up to the door and, greet everybody nicely and don't waste any time, and then get out. And that's fine. Most of the time, I'm waiting on the Omnitracks, or it creates the route. One of the things Clifford showed me to do on my ride along with him that first night was, he said, once you do the tablet stuff, before you run in and do your unload, go into navigation and start to generate your route. Because if you do it then, it will take a few minutes, and by the time you come back, it's ready to go. It's like, oh, that's smart. So I started doing that. The problem is, if you are not on the road that you're starting the directions from, and it senses that you're starting to go like you're like it wants you to be on this road here, and you're facing this way, as you start to go around the side of the building and come up to the front, it says, up, you're off route, trying to recalculate. It's like, don't try to recalculate, because now it's going to spend 2 minutes to try to do it. And so I'll get up to the stop sign, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally, if it doesn't say fail to generate route, it'll turn. It will say turn, but it will not tell me which direction it wants me to turn, because it doesn't know which way I am facing. So one of the tricks that I've learned is that when you're approaching your turn to go in, you basically know there's one side of the road that's like this. If there are any roads that go off the other side of the road, pay attention to the road layout, because if this is all stores and stuff, you're not going to see roads coming off over here. You're going to probably see roads coming off from the other side. So pay attention to where the roads are on the GPS, because wherever you come out of your stop, just pay attention to where those roads are, because those are going to be indicators of which way it needs to go. Like if it tells you to go this direction on this road, you can look at it and say, oh, well, it's actually flipped upside down. It will right as soon as I don't need to go left out of here. I'll go right instead, because you kind of look at the GPS screen and make sense of it. Anyway, so that was basically day one. Day two pointed out a difference to me. And I'm the kind of person that once I learned something, I've learned it. But here's the thing. I made a mistake. I looked at my keys that told me the truck number I was on, not knowing at the time that certain series of trucks owned by the same company can be keyed to use any of the same keys. So if it's within a certain series, I won't say exactly, what the code is, but if I have a key that's within the same number scheme as another truck with a similar scheme, then I can just jump behind the wheel and drive that truck too with my key. So it's like, it's kind of like a skeleton key to other keys in that system. Well, I looked down at because I had sent myself a text message with my truck number in it the night before, and I could have sworn that when I put my locks on it and everything like that, they told me the first night, take all your stuff out because, you're sharing with the truck with someone. I thought somebody else was going to be taking out for the next 12 hours. Like I was going to be getting out and then someone else was jumping back in and driving during the day. And then they would have it back by the time I started at 10 p.m. No. Once they check the truck out to me, I'm checking it out. So I put my steering lock on it and that kind of stuff. I have learned since that I don't need to remove everything until the end of the week. Now, the mistake I made was I texted myself the truck number. And then when I went up there, I said to the person on the counter, am I in the same truck as I was last night? The truck I was supposed to be in ended up having it was in the shop and it wasn't going to be back in time. So they said, all right, well, instead of that truck, you're going to be using this truck instead. And so when I went back, I said, am I going to be in the same truck as before? And they said, no, you're going to be in a different one tonight. I was like, oh, okay. So I was thinking in my mind, it wasn't that same truck. They told me and they asked me what my truck number was. I told them what was on the keys, not realizing the keys didn't match the truck number that they put me in. And then when I told them, they said, oh, you're definitely in a different truck. But then they ended up telling me the same truck number again. And they said, oh, well, that's not the truck number you told me. I'm like, sorry, I was looking at the keys. And they're like, oh, no, well, this is the truck you're going to be in the rest of the week. And I was like, okay, cool. So at this point, I was thinking to myself, all right, I'm going to send myself a text message of that number too. And I was like, ready. But then my brain farted. And I went out. And I was like, wait a minute, what was my truck number? Instead of looking at my text messages, I looked down at the key fob and it told me a different truck number. But it ended up being like two doors down from the truck that I drove the first night. So I go and jump in that. And the first thing that hits that I look at is the fact that there's some candy wrappers and stuff in the drink container. And then I open up and I start doing my pre-trip. I'm like, where is my steering lock? Well, I'm in a different truck. I'm actually probably in someone's truck that happens to use it consistently, or at least I'm assuming. And so I cannot for the life of me figure out when I log in on the system, I cannot figure out why my workflow and stuff is not showing up. None of the information is me. The clock isn't mine. None of it is mine. And I'm so frustrated. And because with Schneider, you log in on the tablet. I could take my tablet, I could jump in anyone's truck that works for Schneider and connect up to that truck, which is just on the Wi-Fi. And then automatically, but the OmniTrax is built onto the truck. So I was like, okay, so you don't need to actually connect to the truck. It's already connected to Parline. But as soon as I logged in there, I expected all of my data to populate. But no, they send that to you via the truck. So I have to give my truck number and it sends my workflow, my everything. The only thing it carries is my login. Messages, hours of service, everything. Actually, I take that back. Hours of service is connected to the login, but everything else, workflow and directions and everything, navigation, the dispatch that loads, so annoying. Because I didn't realize that I was in the wrong truck originally. I thought somebody else drove it by day and messed it up. So I am waiting. I'm waiting and waiting and waiting for the truck to finally send me my job. And I start calling the office. I'm like, what is going on with this thing? And they tried resending it. And then I said, is there a tech or somebody that could come over here? And after I'm ready to go, I'm connected up and everything. And I'm waiting there for over 45 minutes before another driver comes in and he's looking at it and says, yeah, I don't know. So we tried turning off the OmniTrax. We tried turning off the master power switch and then flipping it back on and then powering up the OmniTrax, which takes like 15 minutes. Or no, I'm sorry. That takes about 5 minutes. I log back in. It still hasn't sent anything. I'm so frustrated. And I'm like, can you do anything? Can you tell me anything to do that I could do to try to make this right? And they said, confirm for me your truck number. Like, what does it say on the side of the truck? And I read off the number and said, that's not your truck. I'm like, so at that point I was frustrated because I realized what had happened. I got in the wrong truck, the one that matches the key fob. That was my mistake. So anyway, every single job, I went to Eatonton and then to 2 places in Grovetown and then back to Monroe. No back call. By that point, I was so frustrated at myself because I had started almost an hour late by the time I got out of there. And because I was after the time that it wants you to leave the yard, every single stop that I stopped at, it said, it added to workflow, you were detained, tell us why. Well, remembering what Clifford said the first night, never accept blame for anything, I said, stop at the previous location. If it wanted me to type anything in there, I said, just simply previous location. So that was my mistake. No backhaul. Day 3, I went from Monroe to Greenwood, South Carolina, 2 places, same Greenwood as before, same 2 places. And then to Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and then back home. No backhaul. Uneventful. That day was fine. Day 4, my Friday. This is where things went off the rails, and I got very, very frustrated. First part of the day was fine. I did my regular reefer run around, dropping off at the different Walmarts, and then I went back and they said, "How much time do you have left?" I said 6.5 hours, and they said, "Oh, you have plenty of time. All righty, we're going to send you." And they said, "Are you okay laying over?" And I was like, "I prefer not to." And they said, "Okay, we'll give you this one instead." And no, I'm sorry. That was the next time. This time they said to me, "Okay, well, we got you one. It's 178 miles." I'm like, "Cool." And at this time, I think it was about 4:45 a.m., something like that. And they said, "All right, so here's the way it's going to work. You're going to grab a full trailer." And I was actually the very first person they're doing this test with. Normally what they would do is they'd have somebody after 9 a.m. drop off a trailer and then pick up an empty and leave there. But they said, we're trying it before 9 a.m. So that way it would be there for whenever the people want to unload it. So I was the person that was testing this out before 9. So they said, you're going to take a full trailer over there, pick up an empty, and then take that over to your backhaul, trade the empty for a full, and then bring that back. No problem. Understand. That means there's 3 trailers, though, I'm going to be connecting to and have to do DVIR and that kind of thing. Inspect. No problem. The problem was I went from there to Lawrenceville, to the Walmart there. And by the time I started to get to Lawrenceville, it was starting to get kind of thick in traffic because this is in up 316, one of the worst areas of traffic in all of Atlanta. By the time I picked up my empty and started heading south, it was a nightmare traffic-wise. I was caught in almost 4 hours of traffic. By the time I got to Niagara, which is in Noonan, Georgia, 5 hours of my time was gone. By the time I dropped off the trailer, understood the procedure, went through their security and picked up the other trailer, and I started to pull back out, I only had 45 minutes left on my clock, and it was 84 miles back. Not going to get there. Well, being that I'm a daily home driver, I didn't know what the procedure was for this. I don't know if because I picked up the load, if they would want to send, if they have a program where like they send out a driver to drive the load back that way it was there in a timely manner or what. I didn't know what the deal was. Remember, I've only been doing this now for, a few months. And so I called dispatch and they're like, wait a minute. So what's the issue? And I said, I'm out of hours. I'm going to be running completely out. I'm just less than an hour now. And it's 84 miles back to the DC distribution center. And they're like, okay. Okay. I'm going to assume that the people in the office know their jobs and they don't know about the drivers other than just a few things. Because I don't want to believe that they would make some of these recommendations to me knowing that they were illegal. There may be drivers out there, and I've talked to a few drivers, I will say this, that will save their hours by, as soon as they get to a Walmart, they will go off duty in order to save their hours because they work 6 days a week. And there's a few drivers I've talked to that work 6 days a week. And if you work 6 days a week, you have your 11-hour clock. But then you also, on top of that, you also additionally, every time you go to a Walmart, you're going to be inside there unloading for about 30 minutes. You also are going to have to pre-trip and post-trip. All that kind of stuff has to be done technically on the clock too. But I do know some people that work 6 days that don't want to run out their 70-hour clocks and have to reset someplace halfway through their last day. So they will log off to try to save their hours. So that way, basically all they're doing is driving for their 11. Talking to people, though, there's also some other things they'll do. They will also, for example, if they're caught in rush hour, if they're caught in traffic, they'll go to yard move because it gives you up to 19 miles an hour that you can go. So you don't have to creep along at 4 miles an hour in on-duty status. You can go up to 19 miles an hour, and it doesn't count towards your drive clock. There's other little tricks like that people have told me I can do. And I'm assuming, like I said, that the office knows their job because they offered me no solutions. I was like, what do you normally do? Well, I don't know. The first thing she said, the person I spoke to said, well, can you edit your hours to get any of them back? And I'm like, okay, this is my 14-hour clock that's expiring, not my 11, number one. And number two is that you cannot edit your hours to gain, put some off the clock in order to get back on the clock hours. That's not allowed. And she's like, wait a minute, there's something that you can do. And she mentioned a macro 56 or some crap. She said, isn't there a macro 56 that you can put in that allows you to drive extra time? And I'm thinking, what in the rule book says this? And she started to say, well, yeah, you're able to like drive at home. And if your car is at the office here, you could just drive the truck over here and then jump in your car and continue on home. I'm like, okay, it sounded almost like, since she was talking about home, it sounded like personal conveyance, but you only use that when you're bobtail and you're not under a load to go home. I was like, you can't do that under this circumstance. And she's like, wait a minute, can we extend his clock? So she starts talking to someone behind her. Can we extend his clock? And I'm like, no, you can only, to my knowledge, you can only extend a clock in cases of bad weather. And she's like, I don't know. Let me put you on hold. She put me on hold while she supposedly looked things up or talked to some people. And it was like 6 to 8 minutes. And finally I'm like, I'm not just going to sit here on hold all day. In the meantime, my 14-hour clock is expiring. So I hung up and called back, and she was like, yeah, let me transfer you over to someone. And it transferred me over to someone else who had no solutions either. It was like, so what exactly is the situation? I told her the situation, and she's like, yeah, I don't know. Had no solutions. So I'm watching this clock. And she said, well, the only thing we have is that there is a macro you can put in there that allows you to do something that lets people get home. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. There is, and there's certain exemptions that you have. One of them is if you are doing short hauls, if you are within 150 miles doing local deliveries within 150 miles, there is a short haul exemption you can get. But this office is within 200 miles, so that doesn't apply. So short haul exemption is nothing we would get. And then they said, here, call up one of the mentors. And so gave me his number. And I called him up and I said, yeah, they told me to put in a macro 56 or something. He says, I don't even know what that is. And I started to explain it. And he said, whoa, wait a second. And he says, it sounds like they're talking about personal conveyance. And I said, that's the way it sounded to me too. He says, what they're asking you to do is highly illegal. I'm like, I was thinking the same thing. And again, I think it's because they're not drivers. They might have talked to drivers in the past, and these might have been solutions for their particular situation, but they don't apply to me. So part of it being a driver is you have to know that what things do apply to you and what things don't, so that way you can remain compliant. And being that they're not drivers and they're not trained to be, they don't know all those logistics, so we're required to know them. So I was like, yeah, that's the way it sounded to me. He's like, yeah, I don't know of any solution. I'll give you, get the number, call safety. Okay. don't know why I need to call safety, but anyway, I called safety, and he told me that the guy I needed to speak to is like one of the managers or whatever. And I got him on the phone and I explained the situation, and he was like, "Yeah, there's really nothing that you can do. If you are running out of time, the only solution is to shut down for 10 hours." Okay, there's no other solution. No. If your 14 is running out, you have to stop for 10 hours. It's what I was thinking too. Now, I should also preface this by saying that by the time I had talked to these various different people multiple different times, my clock was at less than 30 minutes, and or approaching 30 minutes, I should say. And I knew that I was about 7 miles away from the nearest truck stop, Pilot Flying J, in LaGrange, in Noonan. And that was the only chance I had, is once I got there, I could spend the rest of my hours, if I wanted to, sitting there twiddling my thumb trying to figure out what to do. But in the meantime, I did not want to get stuck there at Niagara. So I went ahead and drove down there. Then I continued making phone calls. Nobody had any solutions. So finally, I just was frustrated. I finally called back and I said, all right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to shut down here for 10 hours, even though it was my Saturday. I said, I'm going to shut down here for 10 hours. As soon as my clock becomes open again, I'm going to drive this back. I'm going to park it. I'm going to do the delivery back to the DC, and then I'm going to go home. They're like, okay. The truck, two things. Number one is the truck is only set up for day drivers, so it's not really set up. Number two is it's only a slip seat vehicle, so it's not even something that I can modify or bring things to set myself up, creature comforts and stuff like that for the week, unless I want to completely move out of the truck at the end of the week. So I didn't have anything there I needed. I tried napping, but I had no sheets. I had no anything. And just laying down on that mattress that was like this thin, and it was this garbage, like uncomfortable, crappy mattress. And so I took my vest and I rolled it around to make a pillow out of it. But geez, it was just terrible. I could not sleep, tossed and turned. And I was more alert when I started the process than I was by the time the 10 hours has expired, because by that point I was just could not sleep properly. I was sore and whatever else. I was still awake, but it was just, I was so frustrated and annoyed at that point. I was just like, I just got to get home. And at this point, the pure adrenaline and frustration was keeping me going. So I get back, park the truck, go inside, and at this point, it's like 6, 7 p.m. or whatever it was. I had all the time in the world to get back there. And the guy was like really surprised to see me there. He's like, oh, are you coming in? I'm like, no, I'm leaving. He's like, I don't think you were on schedule today. I'm like, no, I'm not. But nobody had a solution. They sent me to Niagara. It took me over 5 hours to get down there with 4 hours of traffic. And then I was stuck. And he was like, sorry about that. We usually, I was like, is there something I can do in the future to keep this from happening? He says, the planners are supposed to do better than that. And they're supposed to look at the schedule and be able to piece things together. So that way you definitely get home on your Friday. Don't have to spend your Saturday doing that. They're supposed to actually resolve that. I said, how often does this happen? He says, not very often. It's not supposed to. And that's when he told me that. So anyway, that was it. I have come to learn that, remember how I said during the orientation, that was basically a job interview? They told us it was a job interview. Well, we also were told that we were getting a $400 hiring bonus. Little did I realize that the training for 3 days inside of the office, that was unpaid. That's the reason why they give you the hiring bonus, to compensate you for going in and watching all the video and basically doing your training. To me, that's annoying. If you don't want to pay for training, say it's unpaid training. Let us know. Don't tell us it's a hiring bonus when it's, I guess technically it could be considered a hiring bonus once we pull our first load. But considering that we're not paid for training, we're basically there for 20 hours and we get $400 for it, not including the commute time. So $20 an hour. Still, would have been nice to know. Initial thoughts about the T680. It's a lot more comfy ride. The seat bounces around. I don't like the fact that you can't take it all the way up as high as I'm used to. I like the seats really, really high. That way the visor actually blocks the sun, as opposed to me, it's centering it so my head is more or less in the center of the screen. I like being higher and looking more down. What else? The radio only comes out of the speakers that are over the bed in the back, so it's really awkward. The air tanks don't hold much air, so it loses air if you pull the parking brakes and then you release it and stuff, just like a flatbed does with the International. Part of it probably has to do with those little hoses that go in and keep the tires pumped up. But that's crazy. I don't like the bright lights when you put it. It's a hard click, and sometimes it goes nicely. Sometimes you almost have to force it to make it click. I also don't like the way that the systems are governed, because with the International, it would if I hit 65, it would jump out of cruise control or whatever else. It would try to accelerate, but it would only accelerate to a certain point. And then it was I can't really exceed this. With this one, it's probably the way the company has it governed. It just kind of sits there asleep. As soon as you hit, if I'm hitting the cruise control speed or whatever else, if it's maxed out at 65, which I have not been able to figure out how to. They said that the top speed is 65, but we have a short-term passing speed of up to 68. But I cannot get it to go up above 65 for anything. So I'm going to probably have to ask some people about that and probably find out, oh yeah, we used to have that, but we don't anymore, something like that. What else is there? I mean, it's just a different feeling truck in many ways. The ignition is on the left as opposed to the right. The lights are different layouts than I'm used to. I don't like the fact that I don't have a button that I can use to flash the lights whenever someone lets me in or I let somebody in. I can't. I have to manually flip the switch on and off. The truck doesn't babysit you like it does at Schneider. Like at Schneider, if it senses something, it freaks out. This truck doesn't. It's not that, I'm driving less aggressive or more aggressive or anything like that. But there's a couple of times that I've seen an animal walking towards the side of the road and I've just turned the wheel a little bit, and I know that would probably cause a roll stability or something. Not because, not just because it was an abrupt thing, even though you just do that with the wheel and it just jerks just a little bit. It's not enough to fling the thing over, but with Schneider, it's roll stability. This truck is just okay, no biggie. So anyway, yeah, that's my adventures, my first day out, my first week out. So I guess my big takeaway for the first week is to not trust the office, to know trucking. They know schedules. If they try to schedule me for something that I cannot do, no one else is going to defend me or stand up for me. I need to basically take initiative and do that myself. The company's main goal is to just get the load back. When are you going to get the load back? How quick can you get the load back or whatever? If I were to go into violation or something like that to try to get the load, to try to make them happy that first day, if I'm caught for that, the company's going to say, we didn't know we went into violation. What are you talking about? They're going to play dumb. They don't care. All they want is the load done to make the customer happy on time. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on my schedule. If there's something I don't think I can do for whatever reason, I'm going to have to speak up and let them know. I'll have to talk to a couple of people about that and find out if there's effective ways of saying it, but that's the long and the short of it. First takeaway, I'm going to have to keep an eye on them. The differences between Schneider and Marten, the OmniTrack system is garbage. I hate it. It's like the system, if it sends me a new message, it says, new important message has arrived. It doesn't matter what that message is. Every time you come to a stop, it says, make sure you get your proper load straps. And if they refuse to accept or whatever, contact the office. And so I was like, whoa, what's going on here? So every single time it stops, that you come to a stop, and I asked them the first day, I asked the dispatchers, what's with the message? And they said, yeah, just ignore that. There's a whole bunch of those messages it just sends you. And it says, new important messages. It goes ding, it notifies you and then says, a new important message has arrived. It's not important. It is almost never important. It's exactly the same messages that come through chat on your phone. I have not yet found a message that was actually important, so I ignore them. It's the boy who cried wolf at this point. And I've only been here a few days, and yet I've already gotten to the point where in order to clear them all out, you have to bring up one message and then just quickly scroll back through all of them and watch the number go from 32, 31, 30 unread messages. And as soon as you get down through them all, then you can hit delete all. If not, it says, would you like to delete the unread messages? The slowness of the OmniTrax. If you ever have to reboot it, it takes forever. That is highly annoying. That OmniTrax system, I mean, seriously, it needs to be put down. It needs to be, shot in the head like a lame animal that's been struck and is holding on for dear life in pain, because it is such a bad system. I mean, and maybe I'm off. Maybe it's just this truck has a really jacked up one. The next week when I get into a different truck, we'll see. If OmniTrax is still slow, if it's still a garbage piece of system that as I'm approaching, I'm like seeing on the GPS, there's like two streets and it's telling me to turn right onto one of them. And it's night, so I can't really see the street lines, the street signs nearly as well until I get closer to them and I'm slowing down for them. But it looks like I'm still approaching it. So I'll go past my turn. Because the GPS is so far behind. And then it will say, before it even notices on the screen that I have passed the turn, it says, it indicates that I needed to have taken my turn there. I'm like, great. Thank you for that. There is so much in workflow that you have to type. Every single screen, every single stop, you have to go in there and put the bill of lading number in. You have to put in the trailer numbers again. You have to put in all the same stuff over and over again. I wish it would ask you when you go into workflow at the next stop, would you like to autofill some of these? And you just click yes, and it will autofill certain things. I understand that where it wants you to check the temperatures on the side of the reefer, I understand that. But but the default temperatures that it's set to, you should be able to adjust those. Once you put them in there once, it should automatically know that. It should know the bill of lading. It should know other things. And if you say no, don't autofill, then you can type it all in. But if you say yes, then it should pull in the same information as before. The company is going to be transitioning to tablets before the end of the year, though. This OmniTrack system, though, is insane. It's so slow. I don't get along with it at all. Unfortunately, it's a necessity, though. So I guess on that note, I'm pretty tired. So I'm going to call it there. Thanks for watching.